Hello and welcome back. Um, in this video, we are going to learn about the inner ear. And in order to understand the inner ear, we have to understand that there are two labyrinths. So the inner ear is located in the temporal bone, and basically there is this pathway that's not just a straight path, but it's very curved. Kind of think of like a Halloween maze, okay? And that pathway goes through the bone. But then that pathway is lined by a membrane. So the pathway in the bone is called the bony labyrinth, and then the membrane that is following the exact same pathway as the bony labyrinth, that's called the membranous labyrinth. Okay. So these aren't going to be the names of any specific structure, but there are going to be structures that compose the bony labyrinth, and there are going to be different structures that compose the membranous labyrinth. So when we look at this, for instance, let's think, for instance, a tunnel, okay? And then the outline of the actual tunnel in the mountain, that would be the bony labyrinth. So that's that big brown circle on the outside. And then if we happen to line the entire tunnel with, say, for instance, fabric, that would be the membranous labyrinth, which is the blue circle. Now, in the inner ear, something that happens is there's fluid. There's fluid between the bony labyrinth and the membranous labyrinth, and there's fluid inside the membranous labyrinth. So the fluid that's inside the membranous labyrinth, that's called endolymph. Kind of makes sense. It's inside the labyrinth, membranous labyrinth. And then the fluid that is outside the membranous labyrinth, but in other words, goes around the membranous labyrinth, between the membranous and bony labyrinths, that's called perilymph. So this is a very simplistic diagram on this page, but hopefully you can get this concept, and we will come back and break it down into its various parts. So let's start first with the bony labyrinth. If we were to pour something into the mold, this is what it would look like, okay? And as you can see on the left side, it looks like we have three almost circles, and on the right side, it looks kind of like a snail shell. And then in the middle, you kind of have like this blobby area. Okay. So there's actually three parts to the bony labyrinth. The center area is called the vestibule. And you can see in the picture on the left how this is oriented to the middle ear. You can see that the stapes in the middle ear actually is going to be attaching to the vestibule very close to the snail part. So the three almost circles are called semicircular canals. And so they're like in the X, Y, and Z axis, and they have different names like the lateral semicircular canal, but we don't need to know that. For our purposes, we're just going to call each one of them a semicircular canal. And then the snails, and then if you look at these semicircular canals and you follow them from the vestibule, what you'll notice is they're pretty much the same diameter until you get to the distal end, which is quite a larger, okay? And so this larger area of the semicircular canal is called the ampulla of the semicircular canal. And now for the third and final part of the bony labyrinth, the snail-like structure is called the cochlea. So this is a tube that basically goes around and around and around in a circle, and it gets smaller as you go along. So there is a photomicrograph if you cut it so that you can see it traveling around and around and around on the right side. So that's it for the bony labyrinth. So let's look at this bony labyrinth and relate it to items we know before. So you may want to stop and look at this carefully, starting with the back side of the tympanic membrane where you have the malleus attached to it, which then articulates to the incus, which then articulates to the stapes. And the foot plate of the stapes has the oval window, which is on the vestibule, but very close to where the cochlea is. And then on the other side, we have the three semicircular canals. All right, continuing on, let's learn about the membranous labyrinth. So this picture is representing the inner ear, where the brown is showing you the pathway of the bony labyrinth. So the cochlea down here at the bottom, the 3 semicircular canals up around 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock. And in the middle between those two, we have the vestibule, which has the stapes and the oval window right there. So, whereas in the bony labyrinth, there were 3 parts to it, in the membranous labyrinth, there are 4 parts. So one of those 3 bony parts has 2 subdivisions. And the part that does is the vestibule. So in the vestibule, the membranous part is divided in 2 parts. The larger part is closer to the semicircular canals, and that is called the utricle. Okay. So I'm just going to stick with the picture on the left, and then when you're done and you think you understand it, come back and look at the picture on the right and see if you can name all of those structures. So in addition to this large utricle, which is inside the vestibule, there is a smaller, little tiny membranous area that's called the saccule. So the utricle is closer to the semicircular canals, and the saccule is closer to the cochlea. Also want to point out that I really like this picture of the bony labyrinth because it's clearly showing the oval window as well as the round window, both of which are attached to the vestibule. All right, continuing on with the membranous labyrinth. Inside the semicircular canals, we have semicircular ducts, and they mirror the canals completely. So they start out one size, and then when we meet the ampulla of the semicircular canal, we have an ampulla of the semicircular duct. And yes, there is something that looks like a lilac colored barbell inside each of the ampullas of the semicircular duct, but that is a topic for lecture, not for lab. Looking inside the cochlea, the name of the membranous labyrinth inside the cochlea is called the cochlear duct. Okay. So hopefully you've clued in. Anytime you hear that word duct, it's talking about membranous labyrinth and not bony. All right. Now, let's go back and think about the fluid. So if you recall, inside the membranous labyrinth, we are going to be having endolymph. And outside the membranous labyrinth, but inside the bony labyrinth, we are going to be having perilymph. So if you look at a model of the ear, this area right here is showing the inner ear, where I think you clearly can see the snail-like cochlea, and then these are the 3 semicircular canals. And in the semicircular canal, there are these clear tubings, which are, the clear tubing is meant to represent the semicircular duct. And inside the clear tubing, you can see this golden colored fluid. And that fluid is then meant to represent the endolymph that's inside the semicircular duct. As far as the cochlea, let's take that snail-like structure and let's unroll it, which is the picture on your right. And whereas in the picture on the left, you can see the purple colored cochlear duct inside the cochlea, on the one on your right, it's this whitish color cochlear duct. And now you can see that the perilymph that's surrounding the cochlear duct appears to be both above and below the cochlea. So if we were to take a cross section going through the unrolled cochlea, it would look like the picture on the right, where this upper area here containing the blue fluid is going to be this upper chamber here. And this lower chamber here containing the blue fluid is going to be this lower chamber here. And if you look at the unroll, you can see that the fluid between the two is contiguous. So all of that's going to be perilymph. And then this middle chamber filled with fluid is going to be this middle chamber. So unlike my previous picture, which showed one circle inside the other circle, what has happened is this has become triangular and it's actually attached to one side. And so it definitely has this more triangular structure. And so the triangular structure is going to be the cochlear duct. So the upper part containing the blue fluid, which was outside the cochlear duct, is called the scala vestibuli. So the scala vestibuli is part of that cochlea, part of the bony labyrinth. And then the lower portion containing the blue fluid is going to be called the scala tympani. Now, as far as trying to remember which one's on top and which one's below, just remember you put your vest, scala vestibuli, on top, and you put your pants, scala tympani, on the bottom. Okay. So when you're looking at the picture, how do you figure out if it goes this way or if it's upside down? You're going to look at the cochlear duct and you're going to see this structure, and this structure sits on the floor of the cochlear duct. So that's how you always can tell scala tympani on the top versus, scala vestibuli on the top and scala tympani on the bottom part. So in the middle between those two scala is the cochlear duct, which is triangular in shape now. And so if we put the fluids in, since the cochlear duct is part of the membranous labyrinth, it's going to contain endolymph. But since the two scalae are part of the cochlea, which is bony labyrinth, they are going to contain perilymph. So I hope you understand that. And if not, go back and just re-listen to this part again. All right. So let's take that information and let's look at a couple of different models so you can kind of figure out what's happening. So the first thing, look at the picture at the upper left, and what you will notice right here in the middle is the vestibule, and there is the stapes and the oval window, which I said was on the vestibule really close to the cochlea. It actually, that oval window actually opens into the scala vestibuli. And similarly, the scala tympani opens into the round window. So those are really good landmarks for orienting yourself. So when you look at this particular model, I think you clearly can see the round window in the vestibule, which correlates to this. So then this in blue must correlate to this in blue. So that would be the scala, that's right, tympani. And then above the scala tympani, this white structure is the same as this white structure, and both of those are the cochlear duct. And then the uppermost scala vestibuli in this model is this peach color. And then I think you can see as they're curling around, you're going to have another layer of blue, white, peach, and the colors are going to stay the same. So that explains that model. Going to the model on the right, what you're going to do is you're going to find the triangular cochlear duct, put that structure on the bottom part of it. So then you know this is, the yellow is scala tympani, and the peach on this one is scala vestibuli. That's right. And it doesn't matter how these are oriented, the colors are going to remain the same. All right. So let's go back to this cross section of the cochlea, and that's what the model on the right is. It's just the cross section of the cochlea, whereas on the left is a photomicrograph of it. So if we go back to this picture for a second, up here in the upper left, knowing that the cochlear duct is a membrane, that means there is a membrane that separates the scala vestibuli from the cochlear duct. And there's another membrane that separates the cochlear duct from the scala tympani. So when we look at it in cross sections, here's the cochlear duct, and we can see that those two membranes are going to be here and here. So the one between the scala vestibuli and the cochlear duct is called the vestibular membrane. The old name for it was Reissner's membrane, but most people are now just calling it vestibular membrane because it makes sense. scala vestibuli, vestibular membrane. And then the membrane between the cochlear duct that has that structure sitting on it and the scala tympani, that is called the basilar membrane. Now notice it's not basement membrane, it's basilar membrane. Now that structure that's sitting on the basilar membrane goes by two names. It's either called the spiral organ because it goes in a spiral, or it's named the organ of Corti after the gentleman who first recognized it. Okay. And this is a structure that's intimately involved with the hearing process. So let's look at that spiral organ / organ of Corti a little bit closer and learn its various components. In the spiral organ, we have various cells, and they are called hair cells. Not a fancy name, they're just a hair cell. Because when you look at it, you can see these structures above them sticking up that reminded some people of like a little crew cut haircut up there. And those structures are actually stereocilia. In other words, they're really long cilia that are going to have to do with your senses. Okay, and so the stereocilia are extensions of the hair cells, and they are caught in this membrane right here, and that membrane is called the tectorial membrane. So envision if I was the cell and I had hair going up, and they would be caught in like a jello jiggler membrane, and that every time I went up and down, the stereocilia would bend and stretch, and that's going to give us some nerve impulses, as we'll see later on. So that is the tectorial membrane that the stereocilia are caught in. Now, in the basilar membrane, or adjacent to the basilar membrane, we are going to have a sensory nerve to carry these impulses to the brain. And that nerve, because we're in the cochlea, is called the cochlear nerve. So you can see it in the photomicrograph. In this particular model, it is a blue color. In other models, it is yellow. And on the drawing, you clearly can see a yellow nerve leaving the cochlea. And what the cochlear nerve does is it joins up with the vestibular nerve, and the vestibular nerve originates in the vestibule as well as in the ampulla of the semicircular ducts. Okay. And so then the vestibular nerve joins up with the cochlear nerve to form the 8th cranial nerve, the vestibular cochlear nerve, and it goes through that internal acoustic meatus to enter the brainstem. Okay, so this last slide is just to remind you, if you haven't done it already, to be sure to look online and find the link and watch this video on how hearing works. Thank you once again for all your hard work, and I will see you soon.